high atop, well, 3 floors up to be exact, but today I feel like I'm sitting 30 floors above the iconic Sunset Strip here in Hollywood, California. And why? Because today I'm recording my first episode of the Deep Dishin Podcast. I am your host, Tommy Dinos, straight from Houston, Texas, representing H-Town, the 713. Go Astros. And now I know LA listeners have already tuned out, and that's all right. That's okay. But I've got something for you, LA, and everyone else who tunes into this podcast. What I'm hoping you'll get out of this podcast and ensuing episodes is the drive to be great in whatever it is you want to do, but also create a roadmap for yourself to get there. So I'm hoping that with every guest we have on, you'll take a little something from each one. Doesn't matter what line of work you're in, doesn't matter what line of work our guests are in. My objective is that you will take a little something away from each and every guest to make yourself a little bit better each day. So I hope you enjoy this first episode. We have more to come. My first guest is a regular at the world-famous Comedy Store right here in Hollywood. You can also catch him in the Netflix series, I Think You Should Leave. A lot of great content on his social media, which I'll have him tell you all about at the end. Had an opportunity to see him perform in person at the world-famous Hollywood Improv the other night, and man, he was funny. Did not disappoint at all. Great host. This guy's a workhorse, which I really admire. He's always working. Today, he is the Bill Murray to my David Letterman, which I hope you get that reference.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Yeah, Thank God. Older people will. I don't know if the younger people will. Not that I'm David Letterman, but you're closer to Bill Murray than I am David Letterman. But very happy to welcome this very talented comedian, Mr. Bruce Gray. Bruce,
hi.
Thank you so much, man. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having
Thanks
me.
for being here. Really appreciate it. Man, look, I've got this fascination with comedians, especially stand-up. So what I want to get into with you is more the psychology. Mm-hmm. Pick your brain. I want to get more into, kind of a deeper dive into the stand-up world. Yeah. So I'm looking to do. In fact, today I had an opportunity for a joke. I was at my hotel, and guy in the elevator said, "Oh, I'm going up to 8, but my girlfriend's on 7th floor." I said, "Okay." And he goes, "I'm just kidding." When I left, I was like, man, I missed an opportunity for a joke. I could have said something like, "Well, I just dropped her off at 8. Right? Yeah. So I mean that was a missed joke.
Yeah. It would almost be funnier if it went over badly and he was like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Exactly. Well, then that's the thing. Would have been inappropriate or what? So, look, before we deep dive, kind of tell me your experience with I Think I Should Leave.
Yeah. I mean,
how that all came about.
It was really interesting because I love that show. I think Tim Robinson, he's the man. He's unbelievably funny. He's an interesting guy because he was on SNL and didn't really break through or didn't really get the shot, I guess, maybe to break through, and then made his own show on Netflix, and it's like a hit. But I actually auditioned, I think, 6 times for that show, completely different characters than what I ended up doing on the show. Yeah. Didn't get any of those things, and then ended up getting cast for a completely different role.
So how often are you auditioning for roles out here?
The strike just ended, so during the strike, not at all. But thank Christ. But when the strike's not happening, at least it kind of comes and goes. Like right now, not as much because of the holidays. Yeah. Like they're kind of probably going to gear up right after the holidays for more of that stuff. But some weeks are busier than others, but some weeks there's 2, 3, 4 things. Some there's none, like around like a time like this or even like 4th of July and there. Like around the holidays, like everything just shuts down for... So how did that from now till the end of the year? So how did the strike hit you? So obviously you write too. Yeah. Right. So did that hinder you at all with your writing? Yeah. In the end of May, I don't remember exactly whenever the strike started, but somewhere I think in like June or so, maybe early July. So the end of May, I was still an employee at the Comedy Store. So I was a door guy at the Comedy Store for a few years. That's like their program of like you work there, you get an opportunity to like develop whatever, and then you get passed, and then you quit, and you're kind of send you out to pasture a little bit. And so I had quit there, and then I had gotten was supposed to start a writing job directly after that, and I was like, this is perfect. Like maybe a month in between, I'll be fine. I'll go from here to this writing job, and everything will flow good. And then the strike happened. They just scrapped the entire project. Everything. Completely. And so, it's kind of just on an island a little bit for a minute. But things are good now.
So you're from Bakersfield, is that correct? Yeah. Okay. 100%. And when did you move to L.A.?
I moved into L.A. 2016. So I think like January 3rd, 2016.
To work on comedies. Exactly why you came here. Okay. So what was the comedy scene like in Bakersfield?
Non-existent.
Really?
Yeah, completely non-existent. Whenever I started, I would have to go to like karaoke and be like, hey, how about I just tell jokes instead of sing songs? And they were confused enough to let me do it.
I was thinking outside the box, though. I mean, that's your opportunity.
Yeah, I mean, it was all I wanted to do. And there was no opportunity to do it. There was maybe like 1 or 2 shows in town that would happen like maybe once a month. There was like guys who had been doing it for a long time but did it maybe 5 or 6 times a year. There was nobody around that really like was really trying to do it. And then I like met 2 or 3 other guys who seemingly had an idea of like they wanted to do it. And there was like some music open mics where you can kind of like do a thing there. But I mean, I started a bunch of shows there and open mics. Now there's like a comedy club there. There's a good amount of comedy going on there. It's
so
awesome.
Talk about the open mics, because that's something I've considered doing that. What's the importance to someone just starting out in comedy of doing an open mic night?
I mean, you just have to learn to exist on stage. It's like before you even try to be funny, you have to just be in front of people.
So how many people go up to these open mic nights thinking, oh, I'm going to get discovered tonight, and have never done it?
I mean, probably a lot. Like, especially, I think this is a good time now because LA has such a idea of stardom, I think.
Yeah.
And so people are like, oh, I'm going to move there, I'm going to make it. And so I think that was always the big difference between New York and LA comedy is like you go to LA because you're the bright lights, and that's why so many crazy people are. You'll go to these open mics and you'll be mixed in with like whenever I started open mics, it's people who now are, on Netflix, have TV shows, all this stuff, but mixed between them is, a crazy guy, like a million crazy people, like people who should be in an asylum.
But I was talking to Jesse, our producer, about the open mic nights, and he said, I guess before you could just show up.
Yeah.
Right. And now there's a whole system to it, right? Like almost like a lottery system to it.
Yeah. I mean, now there's a lot of scammers and there's a lot of people who are just in it to make money off of comedians. So there's people who have opened up full buildings. So let's say they have a building on whatever street and it's probably the size of this, maybe, 20 by 20, and they put 15 chairs in there, and then every hour from noon to midnight they have these open mics, and 12 people can sign up, do 5 minutes each. It's $5. So this person's making $60 an hour, so they're making $700-ish, $800 a day, off these things, and it's just that's like the new system.
So are you guaranteed to get on stage when you go to an open mic night?
Something like that you are, but the best ones, as far as I know, in my opinion, the best ones no, because the best ones are at comedy clubs and like it's a bucket, a bunch of people are putting their names inside of the bucket, and you don't always get up, but what it does is the room is completely packed and it's full of hopeful people that they're hopeful because their name is in the bucket and they think there's a chance that they could go up eventually on this, and maybe they're going to get up, maybe they're not going to. But having that bucket system rather than making a list or whatever keeps everybody hopeful and keeps everybody engaged.
So what's your advice for someone who wants to do an open mic night and who's never even set foot on a comedy stage before?
Someone who's nervous about doing it?
I guess it's someone who's never even gotten up there before, who's never even attempted it.
Go watch one and then you'll be like, oh yeah. This is nothing. Like it's you. That's the only way to get good. The only way to do it is just to do it. But you should at least just go watch one if you're feeling nervous about it, because you'll see what's going on. And there's going to be people who are good, and there's going to be crazy people, and you're going to see it and be like, oh, I could do that. That's the consensus I feel like everybody should have after seeing an open mic. Before
I saw your show the other night, I'm standing. There's that little hallway, and you see the pictures of all the legends, right? And I'm thinking, God, Jerry Seinfeld was up there, but I'm an '80s kid. I mean, I came up with Richard Pryor, Rodney Dangerfield, all these Bob Newhart, all these legends back then. Eddie Murphy. Who was kind of your influence when you decided to get into comedy, or what was kind of the motivation? What's your origin story for getting into comedy?
Interesting. Whenever I was a kid, at least, just because it was like what I heard my dad listening to, I really liked the Ron Whites or like the Rodney Carrington type of people. But then whenever I started getting into comedy, I mean, I really liked, like Doug Stanhope I really liked. Joey Diaz was always really somebody I really liked. So it's Tom Segura, those type of guys whenever I first started. But really, I mean, I loved stand-up. And I knew I had two options, and it was either to really go for something hard and really try it, or I was going to be working in the oil fields. were kind of in my mind. I knew that those were the two options. And it's that if I didn't apply myself completely and utterly all the way to this one thing, that's kind of what was waiting for me almost.
And I'm really glad you talked about applying yourself, because that's kind of what this podcast is about. This whole podcast series is about, kind of inspiring people to really think about or kind of look inside at how they go about their own successes or failures. So talk about that importance of applying yourself, because it sounds like you were all in then. You made a decision.
I was all in from the day I started. I think I was still 18, maybe about to turn 19, but I knew from before I even started, I knew that this is what I wanted to do.
And how were your parents with that? How were your parents with that?
Now they're good. But my mom was like, yeah, try it. If you think there's something you could, do that, go for it. And my dad was like, you're not funny. And so now they're both cool with it, because I don't ask them for anything. So it's like, now they're cool with it and things are going okay. And they're like, more cool with it. But they definitely thought I was insane. There's no way that they couldn't think I was insane.
Well, and now, they're wrong. So did they come and watch you at all? Do they?
Yeah. My mom's been down here a few times for the Comedy Store stuff, and then I do shows there at the comedy club there in town, and like them and a lot of their friends will come out. Or there's a brewery there in town that does a lot of comedy. So like now it's nice, because whenever I go back into town, I just like, even if I'm there for something else, I'm like, oh, I can go to the club after this and pop in, and it's like the only place in the world people are like excited, like get what I guess you would call the only place where they say my name as like a guest, and the crowd's like, oh shit, cool. Like where anywhere else they're like, oh, this guy. So
does your mom ever give you feedback or about your show? She doesn't.
No, my mom's very cool, because there's even like like I had a thing come out recently, and it's very funny actually, because there's like a very certain side of a more prudish side of my family than my family, but I had like I don't know if you know what Don't Tell Comedy is, but like had a taping come out for them. Okay. And I told my mom the day after I recorded it, I was like, hey, this might be seen by a lot of people. There's a story in here about my grandparents, her mom shooting her dad, and he survived, whatever, but it is a true story. And a lot of people, I think, a lot of younger people in my family didn't know about it. And so I basically was like, hey, I'm not going to be fielding any questions about this. And she was like, I don't care. And
so she wasn't mortified by it or anything. She was totally cool with it.
Yeah, and she had seen me do that before. I was like, hey, just so you know, this happened, and now maybe possibly 10 million people are going to see this. So
I can't imagine.
We'll see.
So how much? So and going back to that, I mean, how much truth do comedians bring into their stand-up acts?
I think that everything. I think there's a little bit of both. I think that everything stems from truth mostly. I don't think anyone's that creative to obviously there's some people who are that creative to just embellish full-blown details of like there's always something I think that stems from truth, and then people are like, oh, how can I make this funnier? And it's like, oh, if I lead this and that direction, and this,
that was quite the example you gave. So,
so I mean that is very true, but that's true. But it's like, I don't know. I'm doing a joke right now about like hearing your neighbors having sex or something, and it's like, and I talk about it being I have new neighbors and I have this, but it's like that's not true. I was in a hotel and I heard two people doing that, but it's like if I am telling this story, it's more relatable and easier if I'm like, my neighbors, this, that. So like, I think everything for most people stems from that, and then they kind of figure out a way, the good ones at least, figure out a way to weave around and make it more entertaining.
There's a joke, we're staying on the story of truth. There's a joke that you told that I loved, that I heard on Instagram, and it was the joke about the Ferris wheel operator.
Yes. Yeah.
Can you talk about that real quick?
Just about my roommate being doing keto and me hoping it would kill him after a while because he was so annoying.
But you're so right about the diet too.
Yeah. Like you can't expect to, you can't have the same diet as a Ferris wheel operator and expect it to turn out well for you, basically.
It's so true. Yeah. The hot dogs, it's so true.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, he was eating fully plates of melted cheese and hot dogs, and it's basically a Ferris wheel operator diet.
That was fantastic. Let me ask you this. Are people born funny, or can you learn how to be funny?
I think it's a little bit of both, but I think it's definitely a mechanism, and it's some kind of mechanism for something. Whatever it may be, it's definitely a defense mechanism, I think, from early age. For an early age, it's more of a defense mechanism, and then I think that you at a certain point realize you can use it to either make money or get what you want, or you know what I'm saying? Like you can use it in a way that I think the best people, like comedians wise, it's a coping mechanism of some sort to start out with, and then you kind of realize that you can use it for your benefit in some way.
Yeah, I say I get my sense of humor from my dad because my dad was always, going for the funny line, the funny joke.
Yeah, same.
And the moment you'd laugh, he would keep going with it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that's a dad thing, if all dads do that. They'll make the joke, they want to be funny, and then the second someone laughs, then they just keep it going.
Yeah. No, my dad's the same way. My dad's very funny, but it's one of those things where after a while, all the hits. Basically, if that makes sense. So all the hits. You know what's coming.
So
he's going to bust out the hits.
Someone company's over,
You see the hits crushing. And now it's like I understand that completely. It's because I know my hits. And so I'm like, I know which ones I'll pull out. If I didn't have a place to let that out, I don't know. It's like I would totally understand if I was doing it on my son's friends kind of thing.
So like, when did you realize that you did have this talent of being funny? Because I think everybody kind of realized it at some point in their life. So when was it for you?
I think definitely whenever I was a kid. Whenever I was a kid, I knew I was funny, and I knew that it's kind of funny too, because I knew that I was supposed to be doing something, and I just didn't know what, if that makes sense. Like, not like I'm like some kind of spiritual thing, but I remember being a kid, be like, no, I'm going to do something different. I don't know quite what. And maybe everybody feels that way. I really don't know. But I knew I was funny when I was a kid, but I think that when I was in high school, because I was pretty good at baseball. I was like,
and I did,
I played forever. I mean, just every weekend, all the time, like constantly. And I probably could have definitely not gone to like a Division I school, but maybe some kind of college if I really had like applied myself. But I think whenever I was like a sophomore in high school, I was just kind of like, I don't even think I'm burnt out on this. I more or less like smoking weed and doing bits, I think. And I didn't know I knew about stand-up, but I didn't know that I wanted to do stand-up. And I didn't even know I wanted to do stand-up at all until after I graduated high school. I had moved to Santa Barbara, and I was going to community college there because I had friends who were going to university there.
Right.
So I was living with them and just kind of partying whenever. And I lived there for about 6 months. And I was like, this isn't even fun anymore kind of thing. Like, this is whatever. And I kind of was looking more into the stand-up route. And I was like, if this is something I'm going to even tell people I want to do, I have to like fully dive in. Because it's something that when you first start, especially then, it's like, I didn't want to tell everybody this is what I'm doing or what I want to do for the rest of my life. Like, this is something I want to try out or whatever. Because it's really hard when you first start. Like, you're bad when you first start. And so you don't want to just come out of the gate and be like, hey, everybody, I'm a
stand-up
I'm a comedian. Like, it was like something I wanted to hide from people, kind of. And so then, but maybe I'm also feel like I'm lucky because I really got all the partying, whatever I wanted to do out of the way by the time I was 19, where, I drink now.
Yeah.
But I don't like drugs and everything like that. I've just kind of got out of the way, I think, when I was like 19. So I think I just immediately was like, this is all I want to do.
Yeah. It's funny, I can relate to that because, look, no one knows I'm doing this podcast. Nobody back home knows I'm doing it. But they know I'm out here working on a project.
Yeah.
But I haven't told anybody what I'm doing until, they see it air.
Yeah.
But I can definitely relate to that. Talk about your writing. So how often are you writing your material?
It's hard because it's more, that's interesting. I think I have the hardest time, it's more organizing.
Yeah.
Where it's like something is funny and then like, that's what's good. So Monday nights at the Comedy Store is like basically the open mic night of what I do there. So it's like I go there and sign up and then everyone gets a spot, but you go there and put in for a spot where throughout the week it's actually like more designated.
Right.
So if I have an idea, like it's hard where I'll take an idea and then first thing I'll just like go do it on stage and be like, does this even make sense if I'm communicating this to people? Like, do they even understand what I'm saying? And then if it like gets something, I'll be like, oh, okay, I can expand on that. So like right now I'm trying to think of the thing closest in my head. I had talking about Taylor Swift and how I never quite understood it.
I already started laughing already.
Yeah, but it's like never quite understood it. And I was like, man, it's fine, whatever. But then 2 weeks ago, I had to ride 3 hours in a car with a couple that had just broken up, and the girl started blasting Taylor Swift to like avoid conversation. And then it was very pointed. And I was like finally realizing that's the point of Taylor Swift, but I don't even know how to explain that. But I'm going to go do that tonight and then be like, does this make sense basically to anybody?
So like you'll go tell or try out a new joke and then you'll kind of gauge it.
Yeah. And then if it seems like it makes sense what I'm even talking about, then I can kind of go back and be like, let me try to put this into an idea or something here.
So how often do you kind of refresh or change your sets? That's I always wanted to know that.
Yeah. So it's hard so right now, it's also hard too different. So like the other night where I was hosting, going first, the audience is kind of new into the thing. They're not like, so I don't want to do like a long thing that's all kind of all over long. I kind of just want to be entertaining and kind of get people used to the idea of the show, and I'm talking to people and fucking around and this or that. And so that's more or less just like a medley where like someone plays half a song and then the other half a song. So I'm like doing half of this joke and this other half of that joke and just like being funny. But it's also weird too. I think that you don't really understand. People will always tell you like you never quite get it. And like even comedians that I talk to have been doing it for 20, 30 years are always
What do you mean by that?
Like you never figure it out. So like there's people I'll talk to, I mean, great comedians that are still like, oh, I think I'm turning a corner. And it's like, well, you've been doing this for 30 years and you're a millionaire. Like it's so, but I think literally, I mean, 5 months ago, I think I just saw how a lot of the things that I do fit together. And rather than, if I'm doing an hour on stage, rather than it being 30 things on a piece of paper, in reality, if I reorder everything, it's really 4 things, if that makes sense. Like 4 15-minute things. Yeah. So I kind of just saw that a few months ago and like really like started putting stuff together. So now I'm more or less doing that in 15-minute things. So there's like a longer chunk I'm doing right now that's about like drinking and, you know, stuff about my dad and like drinking and driving and stuff like that kind of thing right now. And I've been doing that for probably like 2 months because I really wanted to get it all together. And like now I like where it's at. So I'm like about to move on to this other piece of it. And kind of, I think that's what most people do before you start wanting to have like a full hour ready or recording a full hour is you kind of go in 10, 15-minute chunks.
What's the longest you've gone? What's your longest set?
I think like an hour 10 sometime, but that was years ago, not years ago, but a few years ago when it was more, good amount of crowd work and whatever, just like in some basement in Central California, where now, now that I have been doing it for, 10, 11 years, it's like, I think I have the fully formed thing. Like it's all actually like a, condensed version of what I'm trying to do. So
what's it like trying to keep an audience engaged with humor for that long, for an hour?
I mean, it's not great. Especially, where I started, starting in Bakersfield in like Central California, it's like can be some rough characters with not great attention spans. And I almost think I got lucky starting there because it was almost like busking a little bit, where it's kind of like you have to get people's attention, and then once you have their attention, you can do what you're trying to do, and they'll be like, oh, this guy's okay. Yeah. Like this guy's not bad at what he's trying to do right now.
So you kind of build that trust and credibility with the crowd.
But I think it's kind of goes back to even like, I think that what a lot of comedians don't realize is other than being funny and clever and witty, you also have to be entertaining, and it's live entertainment at the base level. And so if you're up there for that long, unless you're very few people, people have to be completely engaged. And so somebody like Anthony Jeselnik, who I've is an unbelievable comedian, but it's like, yes. So my girlfriend's a comedian. She opens for him like all the time, and I've gotten to open for him a few times and go to those shows. And seeing him for an hour, especially, like it gives me a panic attack because I'm like, he's so precise and so flawless at what he does that in my mind I'm like, hey man, at some point you got to ask somebody about their hat or something. Like it's like at some like he takes his time in a way that like makes me crazy, but it makes me like crazy thinking about me doing it, but it also makes you better watching him because you're like, oh, I realize I could be doing more of that kind of.
So, kind of talking about, jokes and telling jokes and kind of creating your identity up there. You see people who just are just straight joke tellers, but then you see people who talk more, tell stories.
Yeah.
Kind of like Cosby.
Yeah.
Or like even like a Bob Newhart or someone like that. How do you find your identity? Or I guess your kind of style as a stand-up comic.
I think that comedy's funny because I think that there's a lot of things like that there's no like stamp of approval or there's no confirmation or there's no anything, and the only thing you can do is keep doing it.
Yeah.
And that's all. The only option is somebody like Bill Burr is at the Comedy Store twice a week working it out, and you know what I'm saying? And he's like one of the best comics alive. And so it's like there's these guys that you see like that where you're like kind of the same thing of like you never really figure it out. It's all you can do is keep doing it. And every single time you do it, you're moving closer to what is your thing, I guess.
What's the toughest crowd you've experienced?
I've had beer bottles thrown at me. I've had people like rush the stage to want to fight me.
Really? How come? Why?
I think it was whenever I was younger and I was more sensitive to a certain point of like, if anybody interrupted anything I was doing, I took it more as a slight against me rather than their own thing, and that it would be the same way if it was anybody.
It's like a personal.
Yeah. So it would be the same exact thing if it was anybody on stage. But just doing that and then lashing out at people and being like, fuck you, this, that, the other. Like, where now I would just be like, okay, yeah, like, it's so much easier to just ignore things and like, if people are talking too loud, it's very easy to ignore. And there's certain things where there's a certain threshold where after a while you have to be like, hey, what the hell? Like, what's going on?
Yeah. Well, so Nikki Glazer, who I love, Nikki Glazer's awesome. St. Louis girl, which I have roots in St. Louis. Big fan of hers. She said something really interesting on, I think it was Conan's podcast, and she talked about how she'll go, when she's performing, she goes from one joke immediately into the next because she's afraid of not getting a laugh. Yeah. And I found that fascinating, like refreshing that she, opened up about that. But I was like, you had this talented comedian who can get laughs whenever she wants, but she kind of had that vulnerability about her.
No, I could see that. Yeah. That makes sense. And I think that's, especially when you first start, you're just like petrified of silence, because it's like if there's silence, that's a point where somebody can be like, you suck or whatever. They could say anything in that moment. But I get that 100%. But it's, I think after a while you figure out where the laughs are supposed to be in your own thing, and you even can like set something up in a certain way where you're putting inflection on a certain word that it's going to elicit laughter from that, basically. That kind of thing. But I could see that.
Billy Crystal, I love Billy Crystal too. And he said, he was on an episode of Inside the Actor Studio. Remember that show with James Litton? He said something really interesting that I loved. He said that there's nothing like being able to elicit like a sound, like a laugh, sound of joy from people. Yeah. Right? So, is that why you do it? Do you enjoy making people laugh? Is that the really kind of the source behind what you're doing?
Yeah, I think that I think everything is at least 50-50. I don't think anybody is in it specifically to help other people or anything like that. There's definitely a part of that, but I think there's also a selfishness to the whole thing where it's it feels good. It feels good to get an instant reaction of any kind. Same way if you're a professional wrestler, it probably feels just as good to get cheered by an arena of people or as it does if you're getting booed by an arena full of people. It just, any kind of reaction I think that you're getting out of somebody feels good.
So whether you're like a baby face or a heel in wrestling,
basically,
it's just to get a reaction.
Or if you're a football, if you're in an arena and you're scoring a touchdown or you're home or what, like if you're getting booed or cheered, I think it probably hits the same level of what you're going for. And I think laughter is the same way, where it's like it does feel good, and there's a certain element of like there are people who have had fucked up things happen to them or had a shitty day or this or that, and they did all this stuff to try to go have a good time. But I think even more than that, like you want to make people feel good, but it's also people especially if you're comedy clubs, like if you really break it down as far as like these two people are on a date, they're paying for 2 drinks, they paid for parking or they paid for the lift, they paid for a babysitter, like they paid all this amount of money. And it's like, at the very least, even more than equally of the person you're having a shitty day, you're trying to make feel good. You're like hoping that these other people are like making it feel like it's worthwhile to go to comedy, because that's the only thing that keeps people coming back, basically. Last time we did it, it was worthwhile.
Something I'm really interested in is game day for a comedian. What is game day like for you? You have a show at night. What are you doing to the day? What's the day like? Or what's your pregame like before a show? Or do you have one after all this time?
I think that when you first start, you're definitely more like gung-ho and whatever. Really, my only big thing is I want to get some caffeine. Like usually I want to stay caffeinated enough. Like I'll usually have coffee around like 4 or something if I have shows. Like let's say, I have like coffee around 4, and I try not to eat 2 hours before the show.
Really?
I feel like it makes me sluggish, or just a little bit less off than I want to be. I don't want to have more than 2 drinks before the show. Like maybe one, maybe 2 if I'm doing anything.
Yeah.
Like just enough to like feel like you're in a good mood or loose. But kind of, I think also though, not sticking to any, because I like same thing that you're talking about. I love baseball, and it's like those guys. I worked in baseball, so it's like being around those guys who are like so superstitious and so like perfect on every single thing they do. I think as a comedian that could fuck you up, because it's like if you're like, I always have to do these certain things, then you're gonna be flustered when you're not able to do those certain things.
So as a stand-up comic, is it easy to overthink?
Oh yeah,
your act?
Yeah, absolutely.
Talk about that.
I think it's a million. It's because I think the more you do it, you realize too, it's like every single gesture you do on stage adds or detracts to what you're doing. So like if you watch somebody like Jerry Seinfeld or Jay Leno, those are the 2 people I've seen in person that I would say every single thing they do is flawless and completely thought out, and every movement they make is perfect. Yeah. And the distance they hold the microphone from their face is perfect. Like it's really crazy to watch. So I think that it's every little thing you do has like meaning and has enough. So I know that when I'm doing it, am, especially if the crowd is, 180 degrees, you're kind of moving. In my mind, at least, this is my own psychosis of like kind of moving 3 steps back, moving 3 steps forward, and kind of planting on a punchline, and kind of like not moving too much, but kind of slowly. I don't know if that makes sense at all, but slowly kind of pacing. You're moving, you're opening to this side, you're opening to this side, and then you're coming back here. But just so everybody's involved, and it kind of makes everybody feel like you're talking directly to them. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's what you talk about the foot planning.
Yeah.
On the punch. I've never heard that before. Yeah. That's really interesting.
But it's because you're wanting to. I'm trying to think of maybe it was Ralphie May or somebody was talking about it, but just wanting to everybody be involved. So you're kind of like here, let your right, and then your left, and then your center, or you're like center, then your left, then your right, or you're kind of like making sure that you're going back and forth so nobody feels uninvolved, I guess.
Best and worst advice you've gotten as a comic, or best and worst advice from a comic that you've gotten.
Worst advice is to be clean, because it'll get you more work, which is not like that's not true, but I think that clean comedy is disgusting. I think it's awful. It's just not. Clean comedy, it stinks. You can make money doing it. You should be able to do it, but it shouldn't. Most clean comics are freaks, and like if that's like what you pride yourself on being, you like have this bad attitude of like better than whatever. Anybody who's good can do both. Worst advice, that's part of it. Man, I've gotten so much more bad advice than good advice.
Like what?
I'm trying to think. Being clean. Some people will tell you like open mics are bad whenever you first start, or like to not do too many sets, or this is kind of like people, I think, giving themselves an out for being lazy, where I've always kind of been a freak and like wanted to do more, like as much as I possibly could. Like I love doing comedy, so I want to do it as much as I can. I mean, I was in Portland last week. yeah, from Wednesday to Tuesday. I think from Wednesday to Wednesday last week, I did end up doing like 18 spots. And it's like, that's what I want to be doing. That's like.
And how many days?
And 7. So it's 2 or 3 a night.
Okay.
Yeah. So it was nice. I mean, 2, at least there were some nights I did like this last Wednesday, I'd done 4. Just people telling that not doing too much, not feeling like you'll burn yourself out or whatever you're doing, but I don't think that's true. The best advice I think is that kind of the same thing, that a lot of these things, there is no real milestone or there's no finish line. There's just kind of checkpoints and milestones. And like, there's a lot of people that see certain things as finish lines and they drive themselves crazy of like, if I can't get in at this comedy club or if I can't get on that show, it's like driving them crazy. And then once they do, they realize it didn't make them happy at all. Like everybody wants to get this certain thing, and then once they do, they just realize it's just another thing. Yeah. So it's like, it's cool to be happy about stuff. It's like any of the cool stuff I've gotten about, I've been thrilled about it for, a day, a few hours, this, and then I know that the only healthy thing is just to keep moving forward. Yeah, and there's no finish.
To not dwell on it. Yeah. What's is there kind of an end game for what you want to do in the future? And what's where do you want to head to?
I want to do as much stand up as possible. I want to do the road. I'd love if people would be able to want to come see me do that.
You been to Houston?
Not for comedy.
Okay, that's where I'm from. So, yeah.
Roger. Yeah. I've never been out there. No, I mean, Austin, I've been a few times now, but, yeah, I mean, it'd be cool. Would want people to come see me on the road. Want to do as much stand up as possible. I want to make, TV, like my own TV stuff, podcasting, kind of just a little bit of everything. I really like Andrew Santino a lot. Like he's a really cool dude also, but he's somebody that lives a little bit in all spaces. Okay. If that makes sense. He does TV, does podcasting, stand up, and like does everything pretty solid. And so he's a guy that I think a lot of people see and are like, it is possible if I want to do a little bit of everything, kind of. Mm-hmm. So, I like acting. Acting's fun. I have a good time doing it. So I think there's a lot of things like that I want to do until I don't want to do them anymore. But I think stand up is the one thing that I always want to do.
So when you're back home, what's your workload like here? When you're back home, how often are you working during the week? How many shows are you doing during the week?
It usually depends. Definitely every Monday. I'd say usually in LA at minimum. I try not to do anything on Sundays just because so I can like map my week out and like relax for at least one night. And it's usually like the night if we're both out of town that me and my girlfriend are both, 'cause she's a comic also, like we both, if we were out of town, are both either back on a Sunday or on a Monday like morning.
Have y'all performed together at all? Have you
done okay. Definitely. Not as much like on stage at the same time, but like a lot of times it's nice where there's been a few times, it's definitely more rare now, but now it's even nicer where, we were in New York for a week together a few weeks ago. And then like every now and again now we'll get to do like some gigs. But usually, I try to probably like 7 or 8 things during the week at least, like depending on how busy my week is here. Like definitely try to every single night, Monday through Saturday, definitely at least once a night. And if I don't have anything, I'll go to the Comedy Store and you can sign up to kind of go up later in the night. So I know that no matter what, I'm going to be doing something every day.
Do you ever do, hear comedians doing like pop-up appearances at comedy shows like late at night? Do you ever do anything like that, like just unannounced appearances?
Yeah, that's kind of what it is whenever you do it there, but that's more if people are excited to see you, or more or less people tolerate me for the time being.
If you could pick any legendary comedian's brain for advice, who would it be?
Like you're saying dead comedians?
Well, give me dead or alive. Yeah. Dead or alive.
Interesting. No, that's interesting. I don't know. I'm trying to think. Because there's a lot of people that I do have access to, but I just have never thought to do it. So it's kind of like, I think it'd be interesting to hear what advice somebody like from back in the day, somebody more of like a Lenny Bruce type person of like what, or even like some vaudeville type guys of kind of just more the basics of, I guess, speaking to a crowd whenever that was kind of what was the first advice that was given whenever that was like a newer art form, if that makes sense, of like vaudevillian type stuff or early stand-up of what advice those guys were giving back then.
Interesting. So are all your friends comedians pretty much? I mean, do comics typically hang out with other comics?
Yeah.
That kind of how it works out?
Yeah, definitely.
Or actors, usually with actors, comics, you kind of stay with your own.
It's just who you're around. Yeah. It's the only people you ever see. It's like, that's pretty much where it's funny because my girlfriend has a twin sister and she lives with us. And so just by nature now, all of her friends are also comedians. And it's like, she doesn't do stand up. She does more like TikTok and that kind of thing. But she's like pretty big on there, but it's by nature now, all of her. And it's also just because like, especially the Comedy Store, it's like, once you're, I guess, like in there, it's really kind of like a clubhouse. So it's kind of, you could just go there anytime, any night, and there's other people there and can do whatever you want. Yeah. There's a back bar. You could kind of just hold up in there and nobody really cares what you do.
There's a picture, I don't know if it came out this year or last year, and it was a picture of, it was Seinfeld, Larry David, Amy Schumer, if you saw it, and some other comedians. I think they were just having dinner in Italy.
Oh, gotcha.
I mean, to be a fly on that table.
Yeah.
And just hear the stories, or that's the thing I want to ask you too about comedians, you know, who are always on or off, you know, when they're not performing. Are they still funny? Yeah, a lot of them. I mean, what's your? I think
definitely a lot of people are still funny. I mean, at least with their friends. A lot of people, like, I mean, I'm somebody, I very much want to be left alone. If I'm not.
Do you feel pressure to be funny, to be on when you're around your friends or anybody?
Sometimes it depends. Yeah. Like, but I mean, I'm so bad. I mean, the meet and greet stuff I hate, and it's like, it's nothing to do with like everyone. I'm excited if anybody thinks I'm funny or whatever, but I just I like I have friends who make fun of me for this all the time, but it's like be in front of a comedy club afterwards and everybody's walking up to me and whoever else and being like, "Oh, you guys were great. You're so funny." This, and like, they always know that my first thing is going to be like, "I got to get the fuck out of here." It's just like, and I don't know what it is.
You
but
hear
it's
it all
just,
the time, though. I'm sure.
It's it is nice, and I enjoy it. But it's I'm appreciative of it. But there's something about the feeling of just sitting there and accepting it over and over and over again, and just kind
of.
How
many more times can you respond to it?
Yeah, how many more times can you respond to it, and how like it just feels like you're just sitting there waiting for that. When in reality, you're sitting there trying to get people to follow you on social media and whatever else, where I'm not sitting there waiting for the adulation. I'm just trying to build my own thing. Yeah. Kind of.
Well, as we kind of wrap up here in a couple of minutes, a couple more questions. Stand-up comics, when they're on stage, you're just so vulnerable up there. Yeah. Right? There are no takes. Yeah. No take 2, take 3. I mean, what you say is out there. There's no taking it back. Talk about that feeling of vulnerability up there. And also, I'm fascinated with bombing. Yeah. I'm talking about bombing. So kind of talk about, you know, the bombing and your vulnerability up there.
Yeah. No, I mean, sometimes that you have to bomb. I've seen, and I'm lucky from working at the Comedy Store, I've seen any big comedian you could think of, any great comedian, I have seen them really bomb. I saw Norm Macdonald bomb in front of 400 people, and it was the funniest thing I've ever seen.
I'm sure it was.
I've seen Bill Burr bomb. I mean, I've seen all of these guys bomb, and it's like, you're crazy if you think you're above it at any point, or like it's impossible, because I bombed in front of 300 people in a theater in Astoria, Oregon last week, and they just didn't. They were just looking at me like a dog.
What do you do? I mean, what do you in that situation?
It's hard too, because I was the opener. And so
you got him off to a good start.
Yeah, I was the opener and I was bombing, and I knew I was bombing, and I was just kind of like, whatever. And it goes, and if you're going up and down a little bit. And so it's like, then there was a guy in the front, I made fun of his pajama pants, and they got a big laugh, and I was like, oh, great. I was like, that's what they want. But I know enough that as a favor to the comedian, it would be a disservice to the headliner if I go out there and if everybody I can see and I'm like, look at your hat and look at your fucking face.
Really?
It would be a disservice to them, because then I'm leaving them with nothing. Oh. So guys who do a lot of crowd work, I
didn't think about that. Okay.
Most comedians will, if the headliner will just say, hey, try not to do too much of that if you're an opener.
Really?
It's a bad look if you're an opener doing a bunch of crowd work.
That's really interesting.
Your entire job is to set up the next guy if you're an opener.
Is it? Okay.
And so you should do good and you should do your thing, but the more crowd work you do, you're kind of an asshole.
Wow.
But it's like that kind of thing. I mean, I bombed 2 months ago for 400 Native Americans who were like casino owners and
what happened? What'd you do?
They just had nothing we had nothing in common, and that's okay. But sometimes, I mean, literally, there are sometimes you go out into a crowd who just like will just stare at you, and it's almost like you'd rather have it be too rowdy than people who just don't like you or don't get it, and that's fine too. Like, if I'm bombing, I'm not somebody to really now in my whatever. I don't really lash out at the audience because I'm like, oh shit, okay, you guys. The worst thing is, truly, the worst part is, especially like 30 minutes. You go out there and you tell the first joke and it goes really bad. You're like, well, shit, it's 29 more minutes of that. So but it's the same thing of like if you go out and your first joke kills, you're like, oh, you like that? You're gonna love the next 29 minutes. But it's really either way because. You know immediately. You're like, this is not happening.
What's the worst, without saying names, of course, what's the worst you've seen another comic bomb?
Oh, I mean, I've seen... the
absolute worst you've seen. Most embarrassing.
Oh, man.
And what did that comic do?
I saw this guy... I've seen as hard as you could possibly imagine without somebody like peeing their pants. Do you remember Vine?
Yeah.
The social media app. So whenever Vine had just died, I just moved to LA and I was like very nervous to be around. Like I was at the Comedy Store, I was in the belly room, and the open mic was very unsupervised. So it was packed, but it was very much just like a barrel of monkeys. Like it was just like ravenous. It was crazy. And so this guy is up there, and he was a guy who was big on Vine, but Vine had just died. So now he's, of course, that's what happened. Same thing with the writer strike. All the writers are in the comedy clubs taking up the spots. And now that the strike is over, you won't see him for another 2 years. But he's up there, and it's really going bad. And he goes, how much longer am I supposed to do this? And somebody in the back yelled something like, 2 more minutes of this shit.
Wait, he said on stage?
Yes. He said, how much longer of this? Somebody in the back said something like 2 X amount more minutes of this shit. And it got a big laugh. And then Frank Castillo, who's a comedian, was in there, and he was, I think, the host. And he was off to the side, and it was getting real rowdy, and people are yelling different things. And he goes, Vine was a 6-second video app. I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah, I remember.
And so he quiets everybody down. He's like, guys, come on. And he quiets it down all the way. And then he goes, he's not used to performing for more than 6 seconds at a time. And he just tried to like squeeze it in. And it literally just erupted to the point that this guy just walked off stage and out the emergency exit by the door and just was done. Like, I'm out of here. And I don't think he does stand-up comedy anymore.
Wow. Yeah, it's like, I tell people when you fail, embrace it.
Yeah.
Learn from it.
Yeah.
That's what makes you strong. That's what makes you better.
Yeah.
When you can embrace that failure. I love Johnny Carson. Mm-hmm. Johnny Carson would bomb all the time in his monologues, his jokes. But to me, he was a master at how he would handle the bombing. It was just, that look he would have. He would just give that look, and then everybody started cracking up.
Yeah. So he would do that, or he'd like shrug off to the side.
He'd shrug, or he'd laugh. Yeah. Finally, what's the biggest achievement you had up to this point?
Biggest achievement. I've been definitely getting past at the Comedy Store because it's such a monumental thing, and it's so hard to do. Not that it's so hard to do, but whenever you come here, the first time you go there, it seems so far away and so impossible.
Yeah,
and it's insane to think that it's like even a remote possibility because there's so many steps going through it. Where it's like took me like a year and a half of showcasing to even get a job there.
Yeah.
And so then doing that and then like working up and up and up and then like finally getting asked to even like do the showcase. And the showcase is hard too because it's like even if you kill it all the time, if the showcase goes bad, you're back in line. That's just how it is. And so it's like that's a high pressure moment. So it's kind of like everything has to work out a little bit just to make it happen. And it's once you're in, you're in forever. I mean, really, it's like maybe one day you're not going to get as many spots there, but once you're in, you could go there every Monday and get on stage for forever, as long as you don't, kill somebody or get banned or something.
Yeah.
But I think it's just, even though there's so many people who have done it, it's just the first time you go there, it's such an intimidating place, and it's so extreme to even consider that you can get that can even happen eventually, basically. And it's something that I think that's what's hard too, where it's something that not a lot of people outside of comedy really understand, but in comedy, it's like such a big deal.
Big deal, yeah.
Where like right now, like doing the Tonight Show now gets you nothing. Like it
was something back then.
It was the biggest thing in the world.
You get called to the couch.
It was the biggest thing
you're in
ever. But it's nobody really sees it. It's not like a big thing. Like it's a good thing for people to say, oh, this guy was on the Tonight Show. That's like a good enough thing. But really, it's mainly talking to people who have done it. It's like for you and your parents. Because then your parents could be like, oh, yeah, he's like, people are like, oh, how's Bruce? He's like, oh, he was just on the Tonight Show.
Yeah.
Like, that's what will
it's
make
just more
sense.
Of a conversation piece.
It makes sense to like, but there's a lot of things like the Don't Tell comedy thing I did would definitely get more views than a Tonight Show thing or anything, but it just, the Tonight Show or something like that would make more sense. Same thing like with the Comedy Store, like people who get it really get it, and people who don't are like, oh, cool, they wrote his name on the building. That's strange that they do that.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I saw somewhere you said your mom met Pauly Shore.
Yeah.
Talk about that real fast.
So we were at so they do names night. So it's like the big like celebration when they like paint everyone's name on the wall and they have a big show. So like my family came down there and we were leaving there, and I know Pauly enough. And so I saw him, and so I was like, oh, let's go out through this way. And then I was like, oh, hey, Pauly, this is my mom. And it was like, she is probably the most famous person she's ever met. Like they don't, and so she was thrilled. And it just made me laugh because it's like, I know Pauly, like he's a solid guy, but his fame, I think, was just before my time. And I understand, like, I think he's a cool guy, and it's interesting. He's doing a one-man show right now that's incredible.
Wow.
It's like about like his like come up and stuff. And I think a lot of people forget that at one point he was like maybe one of the most famous people.
Oh, hysterical.
He was unbelievably famous. And he was like the first of his kind of that kind of famous guy.
Yeah.
Like when MTV and stuff like that. And so, yeah, she was over the moon.
Well, Bruce, man, I appreciate it so
problem.
much.
This was fun,
I think you've got so much more ahead of you. I'm looking forward to seeing what else you do and what else you accomplish. That's a wrap on episode 1.
Awesome.
Bruce, also kind of tell the audience where you can or where we can find you.
Oh yeah, just at Bruce Gray, Gray on most things. Bruce Gray Live on the TikTok and everything. But yeah, at Bruce Gray is usually a pretty easy way. Watch my Don't Tell special and leave a nice comment.
Awesome, as always. Well, I want to thank my producer, Jesse, here at Melrose Podcast, and Abby for connecting me with Bruce, making the time to let me come in and record this podcast. This wonderful studio, making my podcast dream come true. This was my first podcast, for those of you who did not know. But we're not done. We have more to come, and we already have our guest for episode 2 lined up, and all I can say is buckle up, because you're going to come away with tons and tons of wisdom and advice by the end of the episode. Be sure to follow us on Instagram at Tommy D Plan A Creations, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Plan A Creations as we start cranking the videos out. Once again, check out the comedy of Bruce Gray.
Hey.
Thank you all so much. Be sure to come back for the slice of the Deep Dishin Podcast. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you, and God bless.